Hi, I'm Steve Pleich, and welcome to another edition of Nonprofit Spotlight. As you know, Nonprofit Spotlight is a production of the Volunteer Advisory Committee here at the Community Television. And every program we highlight nonprofits in our city and county doing wonderful, wonderful work. And we're really happy to have my very good friend, co-founder of the Global Food Not Bombs, Keith McHenry. Keith, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Steve. That's great.
Good. I'm glad you're with us today. Why don't you tell people who aren't familiar, and I'm sure that most people are familiar with Food Not Bombs, generally speaking, but tell people a little bit about your involvement with it and really some of the history, which is really very rich.
Yeah, so back in 1980, when Reagan was running against Carter for president, we started organizing the first Food Not Bombs, and it was kind of around the issue of nuclear power mostly. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we decided to do was to dress up as hobos and hold have a soup line in front of the stockholders meeting of the Bank of Boston, which were the board of directors there were investing in Seabrook Nuclear Power Station, where we had been protesting, and also in the nuclear industry. Many of them were the heads of Lockheed, Raytheon, and so on.
Oh my! Uh-huh.
And so then the thing was that there was not a huge homeless population at that time, and we didn't think we'd have enough activists dressed as hobos to look like a soup line. So we went to the Pine Street Inn, which was a shelter that had survived since the Great Depression when it was originally started. And I gave a little speech to the guys in there at about midnight. And the next day they showed up, and it looked like a soup line. And the stockholders, some of them were very angry. Some supported us. Some business people came by and were like, "Oh my God, Reagan's only been in office. It was about 32 days by that time, and we already have soup lines." And so it was from that street theater that we decided. We were approached by the people that came to eat with us, and they told us that there was never any meals for homeless people in Boston, and it would be great if we did this every day. And so we decided we would quit our jobs and do nothing but feed the hungry. And my job at that time was a produce worker at Bread and Circus in Central Square.
Is that right?
So that kind of launched the idea. And actually an interesting side point to this, not really side point, almost as important, is the fact that while I was working at Bread and Circus, this young man came by and asked if I had any produce I was throwing out that he could take to his kind of a collective house called Broadway House, which I think might have even been a Catholic worker house at the time. And that person was Chris Worthington, who became city councilor in Berkeley, California years later. I think he's might still be a city councilor. I'm not sure he's running again. So that was where my relationship with Chris started. And that was gave me the spark, which inspired me to start taking food to the local housing projects about 2 or 3 blocks away on Portland Avenue. And it was the fact that there was a very fancy new weapons lab constructed across the street called Draper Laboratory, where they were designing the guidance system for intercontinental nuclear missiles. So this is nuclear expansion was already happening under Jimmy Carter. Obviously, you don't build a building within during the election when you're you're running for president. And so Star Wars, which was already sadly implemented by the Carter administration, was really taken off by the Reagan administration. I think the big takeaway about Reaganomics and neoliberal structural adjustment is that is directly why we have now millions of people living on the streets of the United States.
Yeah.
And so that's the root. So, many young people don't recall a time when there were not homeless people all over, when it wasn't in the media. There was no stories about homeless people in the early 80s. It took until 86 before we started getting repression for feeding the homeless, and that happened in Kenmore Square in Boston.
Right.
Before they were trying to clear out the homeless, so that people coming to see the World Series and so on would not see Mr. Butch and my other friends out asking for money and kissing babies and so on. And so it was at that time that I was had to move to California, had to go underground, move to California. And then there was no, I restarted, I started another Food Not Bombs, the second one, really kind of technically the third, because there was a group of young anarchists down in Orange County that were doing what they were calling bread not bombs, and they only used that name because they thought that Food Not Bombs might be copywritten, but they changed their name to Food Not Bombs. So in 1988, there was 3 chapters, and then on August 15th of 1988, the police, riot police, came out of Golden Gate Park and arrested 9 of us for sharing food without a permit that turned out it didn't exist. There ended up being a roughly 90, I think it was 94 arrests by the end of Labor Day weekend, and the mayor freaked out. That would be Mayor Art Agnos, who had been a social worker before a politician, and he ended up. We created a permit process, which then was ultimately deleted by the. Well, anyway, we ended up getting arrested again during a Tent City protest in '89, inspired by the Tiananmen Square protests that had not yet been violently crushed. At the time, homeless people started camping in front of City Hall.
And of course, this has grown now. Of course, you're the co-founder of the Global Food Not Bombs. It's grown to, what do you have, 1,000 programs worldwide or something?
Yeah, that we're active in at least 1,000 cities, potentially more.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
And we're also, like, in many parts of the world, Food Not Bombs is really one of the principal responses to the pandemic, as we can see that, because essentially, just like with Katrina, Hurricane Katrina, the governments don't actually have any plans or any ability to actually solve these crises. And we see the corruption here in Santa Cruz with the city government and the county government, which are much more interested in fleecing the public for their own personal benefit than helping. And so, like in Katrina, what aspect of the government that did exist was typically interfering with the ability to provide basic human services, and that's what we see here, of course, in Santa Cruz, and this is sadly quite common throughout the world.
Yeah, and you and I have known one another for about a decade, since the Occupy. At that time, you were still moving back and forth between a little bit between New Mexico and here, and now we're really fortunate to have you living here pretty much full time and really kind of concentrating on serving and supporting our homeless community. And that brings up a very good point. You're talking about the city and county, the government's lack of response to the pandemic. You are in your 130th day. Is that right?
I think we're about 130 days, correct, that we've been out on the streets.
So tell us about your response to the pandemic. You started early on, and now you are really a major supporter of the particularly homeless community, but even a broader community through your efforts here.
Yeah, so actually I was working on my memoir at in Guatemala, getting a little bit which was a very inspiring workshops and time to work on my memoir. And when I saw the pandemic, because I had some experience on flying down there with like temperature taking and so on in the Panama airport and such. But up here, I would read the local news when I'd go online, and it was kind of frightening. The lack of preparation, not really, I wasn't reading much about Santa Cruz at the time, but about the United States. And when I realized what was happening, these reports, I wrote a email to city council, the city manager's office, the police department, and the county, encouraging them to liberate everyone from particularly the Laurel Street shelter, because I've known people there for years, going in and out there. Yeah. And when I visit, you see that the people are 8 inches apart on gym mats on the floor, and that is a real danger. So I encourage them to put all those people in hotels. Already by that time, that I think was on the 10th of March, and the CDC had already made statements that was probably the best way to handle the epidemic as far as homeless people were concerned.
Of course.
And then that did not happen. Eventually, the staff people at Salvation Army approached me and tried to, after I had rented 180 beds for people living on the streets, when it was clear that the city was at the time, the city's program was what's called a triage centers, where they placed they placed fences all around downtown, and the people were, according to the front page article in the Sentinel, they were to be interned in these places for 72 hours. Knowing the city's lack of support for their little tent city camp out at the Boneyard, it was pretty clear there would be no food, water, or anything for these people. So on the 14th of March, I was back here, and that was the first Saturday of the pandemic. And so we moved our operation from the post office across the street to the town clock. And then when we had learned, and then we did this massive social distancing program at that time. We were definitely the first people, organization, or company to implement social distancing in the county.
Yeah.
And so then when we started getting word that the coffee house at Little Red Church would be canceled because of the pandemic, we decided we would do the Santa Cruz Homeless Union COVID-19 Relief Center, and that Food Not Bombs would provide food and work with the union to make sure that people living outside were cared for. And that's what we started on the 14th, and then we've been doing it every day.
Be sure to tell people where they can go. Give us the website. They can purchase your books. They can volunteer. They can contribute money. They can really help with this effort. So let's make sure we get that to our viewers.
Yeah. So we're you can find us at foodnotbombs.net, and there's also an internal webpage, Santa Cruz foodnotbombs.net. And my latest book, The Anarchist Cookbook, is every time Donald Trump says something about anarchism, or Fox TV says stuff about anarchism, and how we're ruining the world and we need to be suppressed. The books are, my publisher keeps calling me every week to go, oh my God, I can't believe we've sold more books this week than we ever did before.
That's wonderful.
And so that's been a really beautiful thing. And so it's very inspiring, because mutual aid organizations, and there is a Santa Cruz Mutual Aid group who has been coming out with materials to help people living on the streets. They were there, I think it was yesterday. There's also been the Bike Church has been coming out doing free bike repair at the COVID-19 Relief Center, which we eventually renamed or added a name called the Free Santa Cruz Autonomous Zone.
Of course.
And we are at the corner of Laurel and Front Streets every day. We set up at on weekdays. We set up at noon. We always need volunteers to help us set up. And then we start sharing the meals at 1 and share till 6. We also have the only reliable hand washing station in the city. The one that has been provided by the town there is often dry, has no water. So we do that. We do that every day.
Yeah, I want to mention that because I was, along with Rabbi Phil Posner and some others, I was very proud to be involved early on in the movement to pressure the city into providing hand washing stations and porta potties for people living on the street, because they simply weren't doing that, even in the face of the pandemic that was coming. So it's notable that a lot of the pressure that came from Food Not Bombs and some activists really were the kind of the forerunners of getting the number of hand washing stations and porta potties we have now available for people living on the streets.
Yeah, I actually rented a portable toilet.
Yes, famously.
Yep, and then the city confiscated it. And then I tried to rent portable toilets at the beginning of this pandemic when the city was not doing it. But all the portable toilet companies told me they were told by the city not to rent to me. I'd also rented the only ADA compliant toilet for Camp Phoenix, along with a hand washing station there and another toilet, and the city confiscated those as well. They, there should be many more toilets. According to OSHA, there should be 5 toilets and 5 hand washing stations per 100 people. And when we have currently over 2,000 people living outside, of which well over 1,500 are living on the streets without access to water. the county and the city still has been, and I'm not allowed to rent a water buffalo or water tank to provide water for the benchlands. We are working with them to get food and water to them. And then we've also been very active in the defund the police movement, because we look at the city council's report on homelessness, which is very common, that the city council will make a brutal law against the homeless and then have a study. And so they were doing this when they voted to continue the sleeping ban, including that Lane proposal by Don Lane, which was that you could sleep outside and not get ticketed, but you couldn't have a blanket or tarp or anything like that. So anyway, that failed. Yeah, that even failed. That was like only Micah Posner and Don Lane were the only two people to vote for that. So it showed that's and now we're faced with a new proposal by Chief Andy Mills, which is going to be even more repressive against homeless people. And we're currently in the middle of a car towing pandemic, where the city is aggressively ticketing homeless people in their vehicles so that they can't be registered, and then they confiscate the person's vehicle with usually their medicine and their sometimes their ID, often their photo albums and so on, which are then all destroyed when it's delivered to the junkyard down in Monterey, which happens usually within, I don't even think there's no impound place for these cars. They just take them to the junkyard right away, and that's the end of it.
And it really highlights, I think, that Food Not Bombs is not only an organization that is feeding people and supporting them, but it's also a great champion for social justice and for human rights, and that's really as much a part of your mission as feeding and supporting people.
Yeah, absolutely. Because ultimately, when you have been out on the streets for 40 years feeding people, the real solution is a change in the society and a change in an abolition of the political and economic system that currently exists, and to have it replaced by one that puts people first. And so that's what we've been advocating for the whole 40 years. We could see, in the next by the holidays this winter, there will be could be as many as, definitely going to be at least 1 million more homeless people on the streets. It could be, if the different studies are accurate, and no safety net is provided, which looks like that's not going to happen in time. There could be as many as 28 million more homeless people in our country. And in Santa Cruz, on September 10th of 2019, I put out a flyer suggesting that you would find out from the city council what their plans for the global economic crisis would be. Of course, they had no plans, and they still, 5 months into the pandemic and at the footsteps of what is clearly going to be an economic depression, which economists are, often will say could last decades. They have no plan. They're not, they're not taking any of the, there's like at across from the post office next to Lulu's is a condominium structure that should be, and I talked to the mayor, Justin Cummings, to have that purchased or leased by the city to place people in. Of course, they're not going to do that. They're hell-bent on building luxury condominiums all around town. They use the buzzword of affordable housing, which is quite different than low-income housing. Affordable housing turns out to be affordable for people that are starting their careers at Google and Facebook, and it's not affordable for actual local residents that are keeping the city going. We even have one friend who picks up our garbage at the for the city, which is the only cooperation that we've had from the city, is homeless herself. She lives in her car, and she is threatened with having her vehicle towed by the very city that she's employed by. And this is quite outrageous that we should even be entertaining this as an issue. It's obvious that, but the police and Chief Mills and Justin Cummings, Cynthia Matthews, Donna Myers, these city councilors are waging this vicious war against the people that live outside, and they have no plans for how to deal with 5,000 or 6,000 more additional people living on their streets by Christmas, and,
No,
and
of
they
course
have no
not.
plan.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. As anyone who is familiar with the homeless population and advocates for the support for people experiencing homelessness, the homelessness job loss is the number one cause of homelessness. And as we go through into this pandemic, where more jobs are lost, where less economy is generated, you're going to see many, many more people on the streets and many more people who need the help of organizations like Food Not Bombs just to get by.
Yeah, there's the first unemployment statistics that I saw for the county was 22,000 people had filed for unemployment in the county. That's probably gone up. There was a slight dip when there was a temporary opening of restaurants and so on, but that dip will be is going away now that we see, for instance, today news of New Leaf having to close on the west side. We see the Salvation Army shelter in Watsonville now has a COVID epidemic there. We'll have to be, those people will now be quarantined. We'll start to see that probably at the Vets Hall. We'll see that at Housing Matters. We'll see it at the, we'll see the Laurel Street shelter shut down soon. They're, quarantined because it's clear, just like, retirement homes, prisons, any place where people are confined like this for long hours inside during this epidemic is where we are seeing the deaths and where we are seeing the COVID increase. And we have to be aware that shelters are just the same thing. Yeah. And so they have to be, there's more than enough hotel rooms and empty apartments units in Santa Cruz to place all the 2,000 people that live outside in those facilities, all 4,000 people that live outside, according to the much discredited point in time count, which means that there are probably many more thousands of people living outside, should be placed in these empty hotel rooms immediately.
And it's ironic that those of us who advocated for people experiencing homelessness, that at the beginning of the pandemic, we all agreed that people who are homeless are much safer considering the COVID-19 pandemic outside than they are inside. And so
yeah.
we've seen very little, really, of the homeless population living on the streets, of which you are serving. We've seen very little transmission in that because they are social distancing, because they have an opportunity to be able to observe some of the protocols. And there's very little COVID-19 transmission in the homeless population in Santa Cruz County.
Yeah, although now it's starting to spike, as we could see with the case in Watsonville. And I would assume that would start become the case again. And, we'll see that in the shelters up here as well.
Right.
So that's an unfortunate thing. And I think it's really important that everybody be evacuated from these shelters and placed in the hotels that are available. The governor had Operation Room Key, and that's failed to be implemented in almost every county, including Sacramento County, where Darrell Steinberg is the head of the state's homeless task force. So this is, they're doing better there. They got 600 people in rooms. We have 150 people in rooms here, and we still have people that even qualify under the as elderly who are in danger of illness are still living on the streets. But so I hope people will come and visit us at Laurel and Front Street. We need volunteers.
Good.
We are there. We're there.
Of the website again, so people can donate and volunteer.
Yeah, it's at foodnotbombs.net. We certainly need contributions. We're gearing up. We need more churches to kick down kitchens. We need more cooks. Because we're at a level of roughly 200 or so people per day now, 7 days a week. And this we will see, like I say, by the holidays, could be to 500, 600 people a day or more. And so we definitely need a lot of support. And you could just drop by your food, your clothing. We give away clothing, books, food at the corner of Laurel and Front Streets in Santa Cruz. And that's from 1 o'clock to 6 o'clock Monday through Friday, and 4 to 6 on weekends, and we cook at the Little Red Church currently every Saturday and Sunday at 12 noon at Calvary Episcopal Church at the corner of Lincoln and Cedar Street. So they could also reach me at the Hunger Hotline at 1-800-884-1136, which is also that, and our email and everything is at foodnotbombs.net.
Well, it's a terrific idea that people should drop by Laurel in front and see exactly what's going on there. See the organization at its finest in serving people who are without homes, and to see the attention to social distancing and COVID-19 protocols. And to a great measure, this is one of the reasons why there's been so little transmission of COVID-19 in the homeless population, is through your efforts, and not only in supporting them, but reminding them that we're all kind of in this together, and we need to maintain our social distancing and doing those things properly so that we can at some point get through this. Yeah,
thank you. Yeah. And we also need to stop these anti-homeless laws and the towing of people's homes. That needs to stop immediately, because now those people are thrown into the streets, and a lot of them are older and end up in the shelters and are in danger. So we want to protect our friends. And we really think that the city and the county should step up and start doing their bit. The CDC has very clear guidelines. One of them is to isolate, and the other one is to end the police sweeps of camps. And those two things must happen. If you're a house person, if you're Martine Bernal, one of the richest people in our town, possibly, I'm sure there's actually even wealthier people, yeah. You too and your family could get COVID-19 because of the poor policies of in regards to the homeless community by the city and the county.
So we've got about a minute left, Keith. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for all the great work. Thanks for the continuing support. Really, the people who really need it the most here in Santa Cruz, and that's people who are oftentimes without a voice, without a home, without an opportunity to really participate in the community that is their home. Give us a little something to go out. What's your vision for the next 3 or 4 months with Food Not Bombs and the general situation we're experiencing?
Well, we're expecting to have to respond to a massive increase in unhoused people due to the eviction tsunami that we're facing. We are the fresh water now for people living outside. We need to step that up.
Thank you, Keith, so much for everything you do. Good luck and continue this great work. Again, foodnotbombs.net, make a contribution, go down and volunteer, help out with this great work, and continue that. I've been Steve Pleich. This has been a Nonprofit Spotlight, and we will see you next time. Thanks so much.